My boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend, so I stirred things up with his brother. When he found out, he was furious. Do you love him or do you love me? Later, things escalated. His brother pressed me against the wall, his eyes blazing. If you want to flirt with me, then do it properly. Don't ignore me. After 2 days, I found out that my boyfriend, Steve, was cheating, and his affair was with my best friend. I immediately dragged his brother, Gray, to a hotel and booked the room next door to theirs. Gray stood at the door, not entering, and said with a smile, "Things are progressing quite quickly, isn't it bad?" Ignoring him, I stood by the wall, and the sounds from the next room became painfully loud in the quiet surroundings. Why did we choose such a cheap hotel room? The noise from the next room was too loud, and the visuals were too vivid. I felt my anger rising. Holding my breath, I took up my phone and dialed a number. The phone rang, and the sounds from the next room gradually stopped. Then the call was answered. "Hello, Helen?" I tried to stay calm. "Where are you?" His voice slightly breathless. "I'm out for dinner with my roommate. Do you want me to bring you something to eat?" "No, finish your meal and come back to the dorm early." "Okay, you get some rest too." I hung up the phone, and the noises from the next room resumed. He didn't waste even a minute. I felt like a joke, holding on to a flicker of hope that I might be mistaken before he picked up the phone. But at that moment, listening to his voice, I knew it was over. The promises we made, the vows of eternal love during our romance, now seemed painfully ironic. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. Choking back tears, I asked, "When did they get together?" "Don't tell me you didn't know." From his casual tone on the phone, it seemed like he was completely at ease with his roommates. Men really stick together. Gray stood by the door and calmly replied, 2 months ago. I had been in the dark like a fool for so long. I looked up at Gray, leaning against the door, and asked, "Did you agree to be with me just now? Is it real or fake?" Just a moment ago, furious and ready to catch them in the act, Gray stopped me. He lazily leaned against the car, playing with the car keys in his hand, and said, "If you go in and scold them or even beat them up, will it make you feel better?" I wiped away my tears. It felt quite unfair to just scold that pair of cheaters and let them off easily. I thought for a moment, then looked at the guy in front of me. "Do you have a girlfriend?" "No." "Well, what do you think of me then?" He hesitated for a moment, but then smiled. "I think you're pretty great." Standing up straight, he asked, "He went after your best friend, so you want to go after me? Is that okay?" "Okay," he agreed so readily that it surprised me. I didn't know Gray very well, but he was famous, the handsome star of the sports college, good at basketball, good-looking, and wealthy. Most importantly, Steve had mentioned him to me more than once, calling him a show-off. Even though Steve had a disdainful expression at the time, he couldn't hide his envy and jealousy in his words. If I were with Gray, I could already imagine Steve's furious reaction when he found out. So, I took him and booked this room together. Lost in these thoughts, I asked, "Is it real or fake?" He grinned as he heard my question and raised his head, chuckling. "Who said I'm joking? I never fake my feelings." His smile carried a hint of mischief, but his words were earnest. He was good at flirting, and I found it hard to resist. The thrill of revenge, the hatred towards Steve, and the ambiguous atmosphere of the enclosed space made my blood rush to my head in an instant. I nodded, "Okay." I stood up and walked towards him, then kissed him on the lips. He froze, and I was caught off guard too, stepping back abruptly when I regained my senses. With lowered brows, he looked at me, his eyes sharp and clear, and after he regained his senses, he chuckled softly. "Is that all?" he asked. Then before I could react, he grabbed me, pressed me against the wall, and removed the hand covering my mouth, leaning in to kiss me. My heart was pounding in my chest. On the other side of the wall were my boyfriend and my best friend, while his brother and I were kissing in the room next door. The absurdity of the situation, the drama of it all, was beyond anything I had ever imagined could happen to me. After the initial rush of revenge faded, reason slowly returned. It wasn't a wise choice to be alone with a man I didn't know well. I reached out to push him away, ending this absurd kiss. Seemingly sensing my intentions, he let go at the right moment, his voice husky. "So, are you really ready for this?" I didn't immediately understand his meaning, my eyes misty. "Huh?" He chuckled softly, releasing me. "Forget it, I don't take advantage of vulnerable situations." He ran his hand through my hair, his palm large and heavy. "Let's go, I'll take you back." Keeping a safe distance, a bit confused, I rode back to school in his car. I couldn't help looking at him, and though he gazed straight ahead, he keenly felt my gaze. Regretting it? I averted my gaze, fingers gripping the strap of my backpack tightly, murmuring, "No," he chuckled, "that's good then." Back in the dorm, lying on my bed, my heart was still racing. Today was supposed to be about catching them in the act, but I nearly crossed a line myself. Turning over, my phone pinged with a new message notification. "Where do you want to have your meal tomorrow morning?" "Cafeteria. See you tomorrow." Despite the starry sky outside the window, sleep eluded me. A handsome guy like Gray, no matter how you looked at it, I wasn't the one at a loss in this situation. I needed to make Steve feel the pain of betrayal. Early the next morning at the cafeteria, Steve appeared carrying a tray, with Bertie by his side. When he saw me, he rushed over, a smile beaming on his face. "Helen, what a coincidence." Looking at the two of them, I replied ambiguously, "Quite a coincidence indeed." Steve glanced at me, hastily explaining, "I ran into Bertie outside." Sitting beside me, they both emitted the same soapy fragrance. They probably got back from the hotel this morning. I clenched my fists, ready to lash out, when I heard a voice behind me. "Is there a free seat?" It was Gray and their other two roommates, Mike and John. Steve turned around, greeting them with a smile. "Hey, Gray. What's with the fancy breakfast outing this morning?" "Enjoying something, I see." "Enough said," Gray replied. "I didn't sleep last night, so I woke everyone up early for breakfast, feeling good." "Isn't that reason enough?" Gray sat down, giving me a quick glance. Feeling a bit guilty, I dared not meet his eyes. He was sitting across from me, the weather still warm, and I was wearing cropped pants. The leg of the person sitting across from me naturally touched mine, and I sat up straight in response. Steve noticed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." He looked at me questioningly. "You're acting a bit weird today." I pointed at his neck. "I find you weird too. What's this?" He was startled, reaching for the spot I indicated, with a hint of panic, probably a mosquito bite. I turned to the three men across from me. "It's almost the end of summer. Do you guys have a lot of mosquitoes in your dorm?" Mike and John replied, "Plenty." But Gray said, "Not many." The conversation shifted as everyone's gazes turned toward Gray. Steve frantically signaled to him. Gray picked up his water glass, casually speaking, "I didn't feel any mosquitoes. Maybe I have tough skin, no bites." Mike chuckled awkwardly. Maybe Gray's too handsome. Mosquitoes don't dare to bite him." Saying this, he realized how absurd the reason sounded, ending his comment abruptly. Steve panicked even further, trying to explain, "Really, it's a mosquito bite. I scratched it, so it bled underneath." I set down my chopsticks, indifferent. "I thought it was some wild woman marking you." Bertie's actions froze, and Steve's voice, unintentionally louder, reached for my hand. "What's this joke?" "Helen, where would I go to find another woman?" Pointing at Bertie, half serious and half teasing, "There's a ready-made one right here, Bertie." Looking at the two of them, my tone carried a hint of sarcasm. After all, she's always wanted everything of mine from childhood till now. Her fancying you isn't surprising. Silence fell around us, with a hint of tension in the air. Steve's complexion paled. Bertie's expression grew grim. "What do you mean, Helen? You have been our friend for so many years to say such things." Glancing at Steve, with a bit of amusement on my face, "Was it really a mosquito bite?" He swore. "It really was. You know how sensitive I am to itching, so I kept scratching, causing it to bleed underneath." I nodded. "I see. Then scratch another one for me to see?" "What?" I said. "Since we're in front of everyone, if you scratch another one, I won't doubt you anymore." Bertie laughed. "Helen, is it necessary? What's gotten into you this morning?" Turning towards her, I taunted, "I'm talking to my boyfriend here, asking him to scratch one. Why do you care?" Steve hurriedly stood up. "Let's not argue, let's not spoil the mood. I'll scratch another one, no problem." Until I saw two similar marks on his neck, I ceased the attack. I shrugged. "All right, maybe it really was a mosquito bite. Let's just leave it at that." Finishing the last bite of my bun, I decided to let this incident slide. Gray, however, started to laugh, and even the leg resting against mine trembled. Frowning, Mike whispered, "Gray, it's a war zone here, and you're still in the mood to laugh." Ignoring him, Gray changed the subject. "Let me get drinks for everyone. I'm in a really good mood today. Why just drink cola?" Gray glanced at him. "Don't you want to drink?" I do, he answered quickly. Gray's treating us, so why wouldn't I drink? Gray picked up his phone, opened the delivery app, and said, 1 drink per person, so that's 6 drinks, right? While he placed the order, he casually asked me, Helen, what flavor do you want? The room fell silent again, all eyes turning toward him. Mike glanced at him, then at Steve, and pulled his arm. What's gotten into you today, Gray? Gray appeared nonchalant. I'm just asking the ladies what they want with all these guys at the table. He reached under the table to touch my leg and chuckled. What will you have? I retracted my slightly numb leg, keeping my voice steady but my fingertips trembling. I'll have orange juice. Bertie looked at him and, clearing his throat, said, Let's have cola, thanks, Gray, I'll have that. But before he could finish, Gray threw his phone to Mike. Mike, you take the order, there are too many people, I can't be bothered to order for each one. Bertie was caught off guard by his actions, his face turning red. Steve's gaze shifted toward us. I boldly let him observe, with a slight smirk forming on my lips. Initially feeling a bit guilty, I now only felt a subtle sense of empowerment. As Steve was driving me back to the dorm, he asked teasingly, Are you close with Gray? Not really, I replied. Then why did he order cola just for you and not for anyone else? What about others, like Bertie? He clearly didn't want to bring up Bertie in front of me. Maybe he dislikes her, who knows if she's done something unsavory that Gray found out about. I looked at him meaningfully. You share a dorm with them. Don't you know why? Steve avoided my gaze. How would I know? My relationship with him isn't that close. I inwardly scoffed at his response, knowing that he probably knew more than anyone. Perhaps suspecting that I had figured something out, the misbehaving couple became more discreet. It wasn't until the weekend basketball game that Steve called me to cheer for them. The basketball court was bustling with activity, the sound of bouncing balls and squeaking shoes filled the air, and the scent of hormones lingered everywhere. Amidst the excitement, I watched the central figure, Gray, with his sturdy and muscular figure, his well-defined muscles pumped up from the exercise, and even from a distance, I felt his gaze on me. Soon, he and Steve came to the sidelines. Amidst the cheering, Steve looped his arm around mine, displaying a sense of pride. Gray's here to charm the crowd today, but it's a shame he doesn't have someone cheering for him. Gray glanced at me. You've brought me one, haven't you? My heart skipped a beat. This man never failed to surprise with his audacious remarks. Steve was taken aback, his expression sour, but he didn't lose his temper. Don't joke around, my girlfriend is here to cheer for me. If she cheers for you, who will cheer for me? Gray glanced at him and then looked behind him. Don't you have someone else back there? They turned around to see Bertie approaching. I could feel the tension in the air as everyone stiffened. In that tense moment, Gray joked lightly, It's just cheering, I'm not stealing your girlfriend. Having your girlfriend cheer for me won't cost you anything. Mike chimed in, trying to ease the tension. Gray, what are you saying? If you want a girl to cheer for you, you can have plenty of choices. Helen isn't the only one. He then glanced at Steve. Gray's just joking, don't you know him? He's never had a girlfriend in college, maintaining his purity. Don't think too much about it. Never had a girlfriend in college? I couldn't help but look at him, finding it hard to believe given his appearance. Gray lazily draped his arm around the basketball, looking at Mike. If you can talk, then say something more. Mike responded, Gray, you're really smooth today. Steve's expression lightened a bit. Gray sure loves joking around. Gray remained silent, smiling as he bounced the basketball in his hand, revealing a hint of red on his neck. Steve was surprised. Where did you get that, Gray? Helen also has one. I saw the red string and my mind went blank. It was a charm I had gotten from a temple a few years ago, now missing for the past few days. Steve's gaze shifted to my neck, which was now empty. His face darkened, and he suddenly grabbed my hand, his voice turning cold, no longer showing any signs of a smile. Helen, where's your red string? His voice was loud, drawing attention from the surrounding players. I quickly composed myself. I didn't bring it today, I left it in the dorm. Steve clearly didn't believe me and turned to Gray. Is it just a coincidence? I furrowed my brows and took charge of the situation. It's just a red string. You gave Bertie a necklace before. Didn't you? That's quite a coincidence too, isn't it? He fell silent for a few minutes, not saying a word. Mike, sensing the tension, urged Gray, explain, Gray. Where did you get this red string? Gray touched the red string on his neck, chuckled, and said, oh, this? It was a gift from my girlfriend. His words immediately caught everyone's attention. Steve was surprised. You have a girlfriend? Mike added, Gray finally got into a relationship by graduation. It's a cause for celebration. When are you going to introduce her to us? Under the watchful eyes of Steve, I turned away, only to hear Gray say slowly, there will be a chance. When the time comes, I'll introduce her to you. As Steve was still skeptical, he refrained from escalating the situation. The game commenced, and Gray played with an energy that seemed to overpower the opponents. As our team took a significant lead, Mike cheered the loudest during the game. We won, and at the end, Gray took off his shirt with a single hand, revealing his ABS. The cheers from the audience grew louder, with girls nearby even calling him a heartthrob. With his gaze lowered, his dark eyes met mine, as if he wanted to say something. Amidst the cheers, I was exhilarated, taking a step forward involuntarily. Suddenly, a figure stood in front of me. I'm right here, and you're looking at other guys. Am I not good looking enough? Steve blocked my view, making me shift my gaze away. In the past, I would have immediately reassured him. But this time, I simply nodded. He does indeed look good, very handsome, and has a great body. Surprised by my response, his face fell, visibly irritated as he asked, Helen, what's gotten into you these days? You're acting so differently. Feeling the pressure, I furrowed my brows. Can't you stop being unreasonable? Your sensitivity is stressing me out. Isn't it normal to look at other guys sometimes? Everyone has a desire to look good, and I haven't crossed any lines. He was momentarily speechless as my words echoed his own. When I suspected him and Bertie in the past, he responded similarly, claiming my sensitivity. Now, I mirrored his words back to him, causing him to cycle through different expressions, eventually falling into confusion. As I watched him silently struggle, twist, and doubt himself, I couldn't help but revel in my satisfaction. With the game over, I paid no attention to him and started walking back, only to hear Gray's voice behind me reminding me of the evening celebration. Turning back, I responded with a smile, sure thing. Steve's expression grew even more sour. Isn't it too early for that? I'd love to see him in pain and distress once he knows the truth. It's the most satisfying way to get back at a scumbag. Arriving late at the celebration, I bumped into Gray in the KTV corridor. He looked at me as I approached, smiling. Do you think we're just meant to be? Running into each other like this? I sighed and reached out my hand. Enough with the teasing, give me back my lucky charm before I spill the beans. He listened, his smile fading, his gaze fixed on mine. Are you afraid of him finding out about us? I hesitated. Not really, just not now. He looked at me deeply, sighing as he untied the red string from his neck. There was a faint hint of peppermint on him, a pleasant fragrance that enveloped me, as if he was embracing me, his breath on my neck. He placed the lucky charm around my neck, and just before I thought he would let go, he pulled me closer, speaking softly, Helen, if you're going to flirt with me, at least do it properly. Don't ignore me after a couple of days. With his lips near my ear, I sensed a hint of plaintiveness in his voice. You ask me for the symbol of our love back, and then go back to him. Am I just a pawn in your revenge plot against him? My face was burning with embarrassment. I'm not planning to get back together with him. He chuckled at my response, a sound of genuine amusement. That's good then, just as we agreed upon. He raised his voice slowly, treat me well. It was a challenge I couldn't resist. My face turned crimson, and I turned away involuntarily. To my surprise, just as I turned my head, a meter away at the restroom entrance, stood Mike washing his hands. The running water was loud, and his eyes widened in disbelief as he watched us. Startled, I pushed Gray away, feeling the urge to disappear from sight. Gray remained calm. Why are you staring like that? Turn off the faucet and save water. Mike turned off the tap, and his speech started to stutter. Who is he cursing at? Mike was at a loss. So, my new sister-in-law is actually my old sister-in-law? Gray chuckled at his words, still scolding him, but in a pleasant tone. What nonsense are you talking about? A brother's girlfriend is called sister-in-law. They really give face to each other. I was curious and asked him, "Do you also call Birdie sister-in-law?" Mike froze. You know too? I raised an eyebrow and stared at him. He continued talking to himself. What a sin, these 4 people could form a table of mahjong. As Mike walked back, he looked at both of us. Gray, Helen. Can you pretend you didn't see anything? Gray was pleased with his address, but his tone was unforgiving. No. Mike wailed, people who know too much from TV dramas don't end up well. At that time, I didn't know what Mike meant by don't end up well. It was only when I entered the private room. As soon as I entered the private room, Steve approached warmly and saw the red string on my neck. He smiled reassuringly. You deliberately brought this to show me. I knew Helen cares about me. He examined it curiously, but it looks quite similar to Gray's. His smile froze suddenly, and all eyes turned to Gray, who had nothing on his neck. He struggled to speak. Gray, where's yours? The atmosphere became tense again, and everyone in the room looked at Gray. With a hint of impatience, Gray raised his eyebrows slightly. Are you kidding me? I'll tell you now, what she is wearing on her neck was just taken off by me. His tone was so strong that no one in the room, except Steve, doubted him. Even the teammates who witnessed the red string incident in the morning were advising Steve, it's not necessary, it's just a red thread that you said this morning. Gray took it off immediately in the evening. It's obviously to take care of your emotions. You're going too far. This makes Helen and Gray look bad. They are brothers, don't make it too awkward. I remained silent. Gray frowned, and Mike's eyes widened the whole time. Steve was starting to doubt himself, muttering, am I overthinking? Gray asserted, yes, you are overthinking, just ask Mike. Upon hearing this, Mike's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at Gray. Steve hesitated and asked, Mike, we share a room, we have a good relationship, did I overthink this today? I think I'm going crazy. Everyone looked at Mike again. Mike said, I'm about to go crazy, I know I can't escape the death law of TV dramas. People urged, Mike, hurry up, we're all waiting. Mike swallowed, avoiding eye contact, and finally spoke after a long pause. Steve, you did overthink it. Steve hesitantly asked, is it my fault? Mike replied, yes, don't overthink it, relax. There was a barrage of advice, and finally, Steve came to apologize to me. He took my hand and made me sit down, eagerly offering me fruits. Sorry, Helen, I was too nervous, I didn't doubt you guys, forgive me this time. I ignored him, took the fruit he handed over, and looked around. Why haven't I seen Birdie? Did she not come? Steve was taken aback. We were celebrating, we forgot to call her. Besides, you were always jealous of her, no one dared to call her because of you. I laughed and looked at him. Really? He swore, of course. Then he hugged me and whispered, Helen, let's not be mad at each other. Let's be good from now on, all right? I didn't say a word, just sat there while Gray in the shadow was looking at me with a meaningful look. Someone shouted, Steve, don't be clingy, let's play poker. Steve let go of me and said, coming. After playing 2 rounds of poker, Steve's phone on the table started ringing. From a distance, I could see the name Birdie flashing on the screen. Steve picked it up, glanced at me, and then hung up. Why didn't you answer it? Sales calls, bothersome. But soon his phone rang non-stop. He hesitated for a moment and then stood up, telling the people at the table, I'll be back soon, just need to handle something. He came over to shake my hand. I'll be back soon, rest for a while. Some at the table said, rest? What's there to rest for? You leave and let Helen play a few rounds. Steve asked me, do you want to play? I nodded, sure. I remembered there were also times when he urgently left in the middle of eating or playing games. I didn't pay much attention then. Thinking back now, it was probably Birdie's way of asserting herself. She enjoyed this power of one phone call that made people leave abruptly, showing her control slowly, for me to find out. My mood plummeted suddenly. Without playing a few rounds, I lost all of Steve's money. I pushed my cards away, refusing to play anymore. When I left, Gray followed suit. We sat in a corner, and I couldn't help but look at him. You were winning all this time, why did you leave? He looked up with clear eyes. Winning too much becomes meaningless. Winning money is not interesting anymore. I wondered what was on his mind. I had bad luck today, kept losing. I remained silent. Indeed, my mind was elsewhere. My boyfriend was with another woman. How could I play ball here without any resentment? Seeing me silent, he shook the cup in his hand. It's okay, you can play something else, and win it steadily. I was surprised. There was another game? What game? His eyes held some ambiguous emotions, but his expression was serious. Playing games will make you lose, playing me you'll win. Want to try? Our eyes met, my face blushed, and I looked away. Helen, are you feeling hot? Should we open the window? Your face is all red. Mike waved his hand. Not hot, not hot, Helen is happy. Everyone chuckled, losing money but still happy. Quite rare. Gray asked again, with a smile on his face, how about it? I hesitated. Things won by playing this game come with a price. What's my price? He stood up straight, very simple, break up with him, give me a title. I was taken aback by his straightforward approach. I used to think of him as aloof and unapproachable. But now, this person appeared strong in my life, demanding to be with me, and I felt unsure if it was real that he was right. I did start as a means to get back at a scoundrel, but it's clear that it's not the case now. At this moment, I didn't know how to respond to him. Just then, my phone rang. It was Bertie. I pointed to the phone, and his eyes dimmed. I couldn't think too much, answered the call, and heard Bertie say, "Come down, I have something to tell you." Through the earpiece, I could faintly hear Steve trying to persuade her not to speak. Why couldn't she say whatever it was over the phone? She sneered. I said I slept with your boyfriend. Can I come down now and say it? Her voice was loud enough for everyone around to hear, and the karaoke room fell silent. I stood up, but Gray pulled me back. Let me go with you. No need, I'll handle this myself this time. Downstairs, Steve rushed over, arguing with Bertie around the corner. When he saw me, Steve hurriedly came over, his face showing a mix of anxiety and regret. Don't listen to her, Helen, she's lying. Steve had always been the sunny and optimistic one. It was rare to see this level of despair and anxiety on his face. Bertie looked amused, waving her phone. She's lying? I still have photos here. Want me to help you remember again? The exposure made Steve unable to keep up the facade. He almost gritted his teeth. What do you want? Bertie coldly sneered. Done playing, wanting to dump me. This game isn't over until I say so. Nobody can stop it. I looked at the person in front of me, whom I had known for over a decade, holding up the phone towards me. Helen, you always say I steal your things, but if it truly belongs to you, I can't steal it. Her arrogant demeanor disgusted me, and I scoffed. You took what I didn't want. What are you so proud of? She was taken aback. What do you mean? I said slowly, I mean, Steve is the man I don't want. What are you so proud of licking up what I don't want? Steve's eyes were bloodshot, his previously anxious face now even more unpleasant. He almost knelt down. Helen, don't say silly things, don't reject me. I shook my head. No, I won't keep playing with you both. His face showed a moment of bewilderment, reaching out to try and grab me, but I dodged to the side. He cried and said, Please, Helen, let's not break up. I just had too much to drink. Forgive me this time, just this once. I promise I won't make the same mistake again. Bertie, who was standing aside, visibly grimaced upon hearing his words. I admit that at that moment, I inexplicably felt a kind of almost pathological delight in my heart. I even thought about pretending to forgive him to stimulate Bertie once again. But in that instant, Gray's face flashed through my mind. I gave up on that thought, turned to look at him, and said, We have to break up. I have someone else now. I looked at the two stunned individuals and couldn't help but laugh. Moreover, since he insisted on getting a commitment from me, I had no choice. Steve was taken aback and somewhat disbelieving. Helen, are you joking, really? I looked at him, retracted my smile, and said seriously, No, I'm serious. I have feelings for someone else. He fell silent and then struggled to speak. Is it Gray? Yes, I replied. There was a new message on my phone. It was from Gray. Do you need me to come down? Everything okay? It's fine, we've already sorted things out. He fell silent, clenching his fists tightly. How long have you been together? He asked. I replied truthfully, It's been half a month since you and her went to the hotel. We were in the room next door to yours. He seemed to be trying hard to control himself, gritting his teeth. We've been dating for 2 years. You didn't let me get close, and you went to a hotel with him. Is this how you're getting back at me, Helen? His state of mind was clearly not right now, almost bordering on madness. My heart was pounding rapidly as he glared at me, stood up, and stormed upstairs. I was stunned for a moment, then attempted to follow him, but Bertie called out and stopped me. Helen. Do you think you've won? I'm telling you it's far from over. Don't forget your father's job was arranged by my family. I stopped in my tracks, looking at the person I had known for over a decade, couldn't help but walk up to her and gave her a direct slap. She was knocked to the ground, looking at me in disbelief. I looked down at her from above. Yes, my dad's job was arranged by your family, but over the years, I have given in to you in everything. From letting you have my kindergarten's red flower, to letting you be the class monitor in junior high, to giving you my competition spot in high school. And now, I've even let you have my boyfriend. That's you. Why are you so despicable? You have always seized everything I have. And all these years, the debt our family owed to yours has long been repaid. This slap is a lesson for you. Remember, from now on, stop coveting my things, because I won't give in anymore. Ignoring her further, I hurried upstairs. As soon as I went up, the private room was in chaos. A group of people were holding Steve, who seemed almost frenzied. Gray was on the ground, blood flowing from his mouth, head and arms scraped, and Mike was helping him up. My heart sank, and I hurried forward. Seeing me approach, he even managed to smile at me. The sight of blood on him alarmed me. Are you okay? He wiped his mouth, then comforted me. I'm fine, just a few scratches. I held onto him. Let's go, I'll take you to the hospital. He initially wanted to refuse, but then held onto my hand as he stood up, leaning on my shoulder. With one hand supporting his arm and the other around his waist, he whispered, Is it hurting? It was quite painful at first, but now that you're here. The pain is gone, he said softly. I couldn't help but feel a bit guilty, knowing that he was only injured because of me. Mike and I went to the hospital to see him. He was sitting there, peeling an apple. Upon hearing our footsteps, he sounded displeased. Did you forget about me? I had to peel this apple myself. Mike glanced at me, smiling. Gray, look who's here. Gray paused peeling the apple, looked up, and upon seeing me, immediately smiled. He put down the apple and opened his arms. You finally came to see me, come here for a hug. His words were natural and heartfelt, unreserved, causing me to feel a bit embarrassed. Mike left immediately, closing the door of the ward behind him. Seeing the bandages on Gray's head and bruises on his face, I couldn't bring myself to refuse him, so I walked up to him and hugged him, patting his back gently. Does it hurt? His voice was low. It did hurt before, but now that you're here, it doesn't hurt anymore. He put his arms around my waist, and the worried expression on his face disappeared, replaced by a cheerful smile. Excitedly, he hugged me tightly. I finally won you over, even after taking a hit. I will have my day. I covered his mouth. Lower your voice, don't embarrass yourself. He said confidently, What's embarrassing? I wish the whole world knew about it. I blushed involuntarily. After I started dating Gray, there were inevitably some rumors circulating around, especially since he was Steve's roommate. But Gray appeared unbothered, cheerful every day. However, on one occasion when we were out for dinner, a former teammate from their sports team at the adjacent table drunkenly came over to complain. Gray, what you are doing is a bit underhanded. How do you think this would make Steve feel? Gray raised his chopsticks, about to speak, but I cut him off directly. I sternly said, How he feels? He should be on his knees begging me. This logic made me extremely uncomfortable. I find it strange. When Steve was two-timing, I didn't hear you call him underhanded then. You even helped cover it up. Why are you suddenly playing the upright gentleman now? I shut down the person and they left in confusion. Those at our table were dumbfounded, only Gray smiled and pinched my cheek. You're quite fierce, Helen. I might have to rely on you for protection in the future. Gray acted as if he depended on me for protection, but no one dared gossip in front of me after that incident. Everyone who knew me, regardless of the nature of our relationship, respected me. Steve kept his distance, and as for Bertie, she managed to get Gray's message from somewhere. It became a joke to Gray, who showed me the screenshot, perky and proud. Baby, look at this. The screenshot was of a conversation. Gray, are you asleep? Why do you care if I'm asleep or not? Mind your own business. After saying this, he deleted them as friends. I found it amusing and sent him a thumbs up emoji. Gray was not satisfied with my reaction. Is that all? I sighed. What do you want? I want a hug from you, that's how I can sleep. But I'm working overtime now. In my final year, I started my internship and moved out. I was busy all the time, and it left me with no time to be with him. Gray was one of those clingy people who always wanted to be together. This led to the following conversation often occurring. Gray, have you forgotten that you have a boyfriend like me? You haven't contacted me in 2 days. I found it amusing. Do I need to contact you every day? Isn't dating supposed to be like this? Talk occasionally, don't do it every day, or it's like working. You heard this and were horrified. What do you mean? Are you tired of me? I laughed. I'm joking. It's just something I saw online. 5 He listened in silence for a long time, then said very seriously, I still feel insecure. Why don't we get married? I was stunned. It was too sudden. Of course, we didn't get married, but meeting the parents became a priority. I was nervous when we went to see Gray's family. I heard that his family was a big one, and I was afraid his parents wouldn't like me. He reassured me, it's okay, my parents listen to my grandpa, and my grandpa listens to me. I like you, so everyone will like you too. Before entering the house, I didn't understand what he meant by that until I met his grandpa. Throughout the meeting, his grandpa kept saying, if my grandson likes it, buy it. If my grandson likes it, then get married sooner. All I could hear in my head was grandson, grandson, grandson. Fortunately, his parents are very decent people, and it was comfortable getting along with them. In short, it was a very pleasant meeting. On the way back to school, holding Gray's hand, I couldn't help but sigh. If only I had met you earlier, I wouldn't have missed out on so many years. He laughed. You did meet me earlier. He smiled and told me a story. At the beginning of our freshman year, I saw you for the first time. You were running in a hurry towards the school gate, and you dropped your student ID, which I picked up. I was surprised, but wasn't it Steve who found it? He snorted. It was me. I went back to the dorm and said I found a girl's student ID. I really liked this girl, but it was the beginning of the school year and I had to go to the neighboring city for a competition, so I planned to return it to you when I got back and officially proceed. He was really upset, but within a week of my return, you were already with Steve, who took my student ID from my drawer. Turns out, there was this incident too. No wonder that day he told Steve he was just taking back his own thing. Indeed, I did run in a hurry that day. It turns out that was the day we first met. After thinking for a moment, I smiled. Do you know why I was in such a hurry to run outside the school that day? He still harbored some resentment. Why? I reached out and took off the peace symbol around my neck, standing on tiptoes. He lowered his head and hugged my waist, and I put it back around his neck. His eyes softened. My token of love has returned. I embraced him. That day, I went to ask for this peace symbol. See, the gears of destiny kept turning, allowing us to meet and love each other. His eyes filled with tenderness, gently kissing the peace symbol, as if returning to that night. I asked him again, do you want to marry me? Are you serious or joking? He was taken aback, then smiled and kissed my lips. I never fake my feelings. After graduation, when Gray reached the legal age, we got married. I wore a pure white wedding dress, listening to Mike bragging outside. He was today's best man, chatting with university classmates. I must be amazing. From the very beginning I supported my Gray. My vision was unmatched by others. Someone joked, I don't want to embarrass you, but are you taking advantage of others? At the end of every month when you run out of money, isn't it Gray who supports you? Mike argued. I also played a role in their love story. Outside, Gray probably kicked Mike. Stop talking nonsense, I'll just throw you out. I couldn't help but smile. My mom held my hand. Seeing Gray treat you well, I feel relieved. I'm sorry for what happened before. We didn't know Birdie was up to so many things. I comforted her. It's okay, Mom. If it weren't for her, I might not be with Gray now. My mom smiled, hesitated to say something. Birdie, that child has some issues, always coveting other people's things. Recently, she got involved in someone else's family and got caught by the original partner, ended up hospitalized. The doctors say she probably won't get out of bed for a few years. She quickly stopped herself. Let's not talk about these unlucky things. Today is your big day. I smiled and didn't say anything. In fact, I already knew. Mike had told me about it. Steve went to see her too. She had some mental issues, and she hit Steve with a glass bottle, landing him in the hospital. But these things didn't concern me anymore. The sun was shining outside, and I held my dad's hand as we walked forward step by step. Not far away, Gray stood tall, looking at me with excitement. In a world of millions, we found each other. How fortunate we are to be together.